And we're going to call to order our next meeting, which is a combined meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Pikes PPRTA membership. And I wonder, Jim, if you could go ahead and come up and join us up here at the table, and Larry too. And then you guys can, and welcome to all of the members. I see some I recognize and a lot I don't, but we love having you here. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we did not, or I didn't request the seating in the room, excuse me, to be completely revised for the joint meeting. So I don't know if you want to ask the CAC members to pull their chairs closer to the group, or we do have a cordless mic that Jared has. So CAC members can raise their hand, be recognized by the board chair, and come to the podium, was my anticipation, without having to change the seating in the whole room.
Oh, and Jim would like to have him do an introduction anyway. I will tell you one thing is that we do enjoy having you here. We'd like to have you introduce yourselves, and we heard from Jim that some of you can get noisy, so we do expect your comments too.
I just like to thank all the CAC members for coming in an additional day for this meeting. Have our discussion openly. I would ask that when you raise your hand to speak, if you could just introduce yourselves. But before we get started, part of this discussion came about a couple of the board members we had not had a joint meeting of the two in quite a while. And we used to do this every now and then when there was a need for it. So what I'd like to do as we get started here, if the chair doesn't mind, is just go around the room. And if you're a member of the CAC, introduce yourself and who you represent on the CAC, so that the members of the board have a feeling for who's here. So Dave, you want to start?
Good afternoon, Dave Zelenak, representing El Paso. There we go.
There we go. Dave Zelenak, representing El Paso County. Glad to be here. Hi.
Kathy.
Barb?
Plus, I was up already.
There's
Kathy Heisey, new appointment to the CAC as of the last meeting, and with El Paso County.
Okay.
And Ish, at large.
Barb.
Barbara Winter, a new member representing Manitou Springs.
Welcome.
Greg Gooding, I represent Green Mountain Falls.
Awesome.
I'm Alan Delwich. I represent Manitou Springs.
Okay.
Russ McPadden, at-large alternate.
Brandy. You're next, Brandy.
Brandy Williams, representative at large.
Larry Tobias, representing El Paso County, also first vice chairman of the CAC.
Jim Godfrey, and I'm an at-large.
Rick Hoover, just approved alternate, and I apologize for not being able to be there. I ended up with gout in my knee, and I'm in a lot of pain, and I'm immobile. I apologize.
Who's next?
Yeah, I'll let you.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just I'm actually remote. I actually have another meeting right after this and couldn't join you in person. My name is Carlos Perez. I am the representative on the Colorado Springs CTAB.
Adele.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Fadil Lee, at large member. I'm out of state right now, but at large, alternate at large member. Thanks.
Who else is on?
Denise.
We have, those are the members of the board and the CAC who are remote. We do have other staff members and other individuals online who are just listening in.
Okay,
Um,
we got all the CAC members?
we
Thank-
do.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. We called this meeting together because and I think I'm just going to let Rick explain it, but it's primarily about EV chargers and the use of Pikes PPRTA funds for EV chargers. So this is between Rick and Jennifer to begin off with our introduction, or just Rick. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As both CAC and the board recall, this issue arose with City Manager Springs requesting PPRTA funds, capital funds, to replace some EV chargers at their swimming pool rec center parking lot. That was postponed in order for the board and the CAC to work on probably taking 2 and maybe even 3 months work on a board policy regarding EV chargers. So I've included in the board packet the same material that was in the CAC packet. And the very first attachment is from Jennifer Ivy, the board attorney, and contains the yellow highlights out of the RTA state law in the definition section that defines what a regional transportation system is, meaning what potentially is eligible for any RTA to spend its funds on. And as you can see from her yellow highlights, it's any improvement that permits people or goods to be transported or conveyed within a region by any means, or any equipment that is pertinent to or related to any improvement that permits people or goods to be transported or conveyed within a region by any means. So it's very broad. Jennifer Ivy has, sorry, Jim, needed to correct you. She has not given an opinion. She's just highlighted what the law states. So that the first issue is for the board to decide if using capital funds for new installation of EV chargers anywhere in the PPRTA geography is okay relative to state law. So Jennifer Ivy is not saying, she is not rendering an opinion saying it's okay, but she's deferring to the board to say if it's okay. My reading is that it's extremely broad and that could be interpreted via the equipment that is pertinent to or related to any improvement. So, but that's a board decision. So that's the first hurdle for the board to decide if the board feels it's legal. The next step is the topic or the definition of capital. And as the CAC and the board are well aware, the PPRTA can only spend its capital funds on a ballot approved capital project that's named in the voter approved ballot. So, and we have the PPRTA 2 ballot list, and then, 10 and a half months from now, we're going to have the PPRTA 3 capital projects ballot list to work off of. One in the PPRTA 3, Gail Servant from City College Springs has provided the second attachment, which is the one with the blue, and she has highlighted for one of the PPRTA 3 voter approved capital project is called Transit Fleet Supplement. Now on the right hand side of that page is the definition of the city's intent at the time of the submittal of this project, which was July of 22, when the city was giving detail on the right hand side of the page for its proposed PPRTA 3 capital projects. that were going to go to the voters in November of 22, and of course were approved. So it's the cities and Gales and Lands advocacy that in the description, it talks about supporting infrastructure technologies to fuel and charge their fleet, the Mountain Metropolitan Transit Fleet. So she's offered that to show the city's intent of how it intended to use its capital funds for this particular capital project name. The right-hand side of the page is not voter approved. The left-hand side of the page is with regard to the capital project names. At some point in this discussion, Gale and Land can amplify on that if they'd like. The other attachments are just ideas for to facilitate the discussion. There's several long checklists. The one with the red ink is Gail Sturtevant's comments on my original checklist. And then finally, we have 3 different summary options for ease of discussion if anybody likes any of those options and wants to advocate for it. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim Godfrey for any comments that he wishes to share relative to the CAC discussion, and then we can open it and back to Madam Chair. You can open it to the floor for comments from board members or CAC members.
Thank you. At this point, what we did at the CAC was open it up for people to share their thoughts on what was in the packet. And it kind of started the discussion at that point. And so I guess with Madam Chair's permission, we can just open this up that if somebody wants to give your opinion or restate your opinion that we talked about at the CAC. I think by and large, the discussion kind of started, and jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but I think we kind of started it, was whether this was appropriate in terms of were we providing a service to somebody like we would be providing a gas for another vehicle, only this being electric. And it kind of started from there. But Dave, am I on track?
You're absolutely on track, Mr. Chair. Just to amplify that, I think for a moment, I think what this issue is unlike any other ones that the CAC has seen in the years I've been involved here, where I can see both sides. A special kudos and credit to Manitou for bringing it forward. The issue really is this an appropriate use, as Jim pointed out, of PPRTA funds? I can see both sides. On the one side, this absolutely falls within the letter of the law and the documents as written provided to the voters, but nothing specifically says this. And I think more importantly, I guess my only point really is, more importantly, is the precedence this sets for the future. If you allow this EV charging station to go forward, what happens when Monument area wants one, or CDOT wants one, or you name it, there'll be dozens more coming along. You could argue should we require public-private partnerships, P3s? You could argue this is solely a private enterprise. Why should we compete with the private sector? Or is this an area that needs some incentives, as the governments are often very good at, incentivizing the deployment of these EV charging stations? I can see all sides. I have not made up my mind, but I do want to congratulate Dole Grabenik and Manitou for bringing it forward, and would applaud this joint body's review of this thorny, delicate, precedent-setting issue.
If I can comment, I apologize for putting you on the spot, Mayor Graham. Could you remind me what your project that you'd proposed was?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you for this opportunity. We currently have, there are several locations in Manitou that have EV chargers where there's not many. What's a question here, we have 3 existing charging stations at Shriver Park, which is, we have our Manitou swimming pool. They've been there for a number of years. They are free. Okay. So you just basically pull in and charge for whatever. So for at least 4 years, we've been letting people charge for free. And it's time to, our feeling is it's time to upgrade those stations and to begin, charging, and rather than just, give the electricity away. It's not that we're trying to make money on it. We're just trying to, break even, not lose money, as well as upgrade. The location, it's, and Manitou's got, there's the geography and the nature of the environment is kind of drives some of this. Personally, I favor private sector solution where possible. We don't have very many large businesses that would be likely candidates. We don't have like a Walmart or a Target or so forth. You'd have Cog Railway, maybe Garden God's Trading Post. It would be businesses large enough to make sense of that. Mostly we're mom and pops. Consequently, we don't really look to the private sector for a solution. And the thought here, again, these charging units, they've been in there for a while. It's time to upgrade them. In the future, you'd see where the demand would be enough to where, we'd want charging stations elsewhere in town. It may be, that there would be a private sector solution at some point. Vendors, that's new territory. By being in kind of a neutral area, we're not playing favorites. If we were to put one, next to a restaurant or a motel or something like that, when clearly I think that would be a disproportionate advantage that we'd be giving to some private sector person. So this is about pretty neutral territory. It's convenient. It's fairly easy to get in. If people need to wait for a parking space, that's one of the few places where we don't charge for parking. It's a popular area. It's used. I mean, there's a playground there. So for a lot of our residents who don't have access to charging because the homes are older and they need like a 100-foot long 220 volt cable. I don't know if such things even made. They can't do it at their homes. If they come down, they can charge there, have a picnic. The kids can play in the park. It's, that's a narrow splinter of the people who use it, but there is some of that. That's kind of where we're at. The pragmatic solution is we need to have charging stations. I would mention that we're a town of about 5,000 people. If you just look at what it's like at midnight, but on a summer afternoon, we're more like 12,000 people. So we might have upwards of 2,000 visitor vehicles in town. And I think the odds, roughly, I think nationwide, about 10% of new car sales are EVs. So maybe we could expect somewhere in the neighborhood of up to 200 electric vehicles in Manitou. These are all people who these are visitors basically. So they need fuel, they need to get around, they need to have a good time. And they bring money to not just Manitou, but to the Pikes Peak region. So that's a factor. There's a number of things that here I can appreciate the complexity and the precedent that this would set throughout, throughout the larger area, the PPRTA territory. It's a problem we're going to have to, Manitou are going to have to solve, whether we do it with PPRTA funding or not. It's the, philosophy aside, legality, certainly we want to be legal, but whatever obstacles we have, we're still going to have to fix the problem.
So if we put them in, then would the PERTA sales tax be calculated in the cost? I have no idea because I know the city of Colorado Springs has free ones.
Didn't they just pass that
free?
if you're going to have it, you've got to charge your fee, or you've got to manage the fee for that? Wasn't there a rule or a state law or something?
Jim, I think that was at federal. If you're using a federal grant money.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Then the feds require that that if you're allowing the public to use it, then you have to charge. I don't know that the federal grant requires a fee if it's just for the Mountain Metro fleet.
Well, and I should just say, Gail just told me, no, they don't. They do charge for the private ones. You're going to have to answer that one. I can't even remember what you said. It's late in the afternoon. Yeah.
So Gail started with the city of Colorado Springs. So we have very limited EV chargers that are available for public use. We currently have 2 that are in the city administration garage that have 4 ports, and we do charge based on the the usage and then time. There's a time limit based on those. We also have 2 at the Kiowa garage. And if I read my notes here correctly, we also lease space, and I believe it's to Tesla in the Cascade garage, and I believe they have 8 slots at that location. So we really have 2 locations with 2 chargers with 4 ports, and we charge.
And do you know when you charge, this might be too detailed, does it collect the city sales tax?
I don't believe so, but I don't know the answer to that. I know that
Okay.
it's based on a flat rate of kilowatt hour, and they're paying for the parking and the kilowatt hour, and they have up to a 4-hour time that they can spend at that location, and then they start paying pretty steep penalties because it's meant to be turned over to allow others to come in and charge.
Okay. Councilmember Donaldson.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And that question about the PERTA tax, I think if I'm just going to think of my own CSU utilities bill for electricity, and there's no sales tax on that, so it would in a way make sense that there isn't. The thought you had about, hey, aren't there free ones? CSU at the demonstration gardens up on Mesa used to have a free one up there, but that either already has been or is being transitioned to where you have to use to pay it. But it was really for CSU vehicles, and it's also the whole demonstration gardens idea. On the topic we're discussing, if I could, Mayor Graham, have you contacted Tesla? You know, they put those things in. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good point. Me personally, I have not contacted Tesla, but we do have, there is one Tesla charging station which was funded, my understanding was funded by Tesla as far as the installation and the hardware. That's at the Manitou Arts Center. It's been there for several years. You charge there for free. So basically the Art Center is picking up the utility bill on that. I would say that we do have a paid charging station at our Hiawatha Gardens, which is a transportation hub that uses ChargePoint. I think, you may be familiar with that. That's a pretty common EV vendor that you'll see nationwide. And in that one, I mean, the vendor collects the fee and so forth. We do set the rates, and I believe what we do is we take the CSU rate and we mark it up 15%. So if you go at night in the off hours, it's something like in the neighborhood of 15 cents plus 15% markup. During the day, it's more like, I think 32, 33 cents, again, plus that markup. So we're using that model there. And I mean, and that's available to anybody who wants to use it. It's popular with tourists. We also have residents who use that as well. I've charged there just as it's kind of an experiment, and it's a pretty efficient way to do things. Pretty simple.
My thinking on this is that, like, even for the people in this room, we're kind of, is this really what PPRTA is for? Is this a good idea? My worry would be that if we approve this, the regular voters are going to see this as us getting outside of what they agreed to. And so even if it meets the letter of the law, I would be concerned about voter their perception of PPRTA and how the funds are being used. So those are my thoughts.
Man. And that topic did come up during our discussion was we know that this is only going to get bigger down the road as it goes along. And the discussion was, how did we feel whether this was in the intent of RTA in terms of improving transportation infrastructure and transit in the region? And and so that was part of the question that came up later in the discussion was, rather than try to look through all the possible solutions that we could place them, is we start with no, and we look at them on a exception basis. And maybe Manitou's would be an exception, but we go forward and look at them on their each individual merit and whether or not we can justify to the public using transportation funding, and how does it support the transportation improvements? There's also the greenhouse gas component of reducing those things that we know is only going to get more stringent as we go down the road. And so all of those were points that were discussed during our conversation, right? So just throw that out.
Go ahead, Rick.
Madam Chair, since we're taking a little tangent and talking about Manitou Springs specific request, let me point out that as I mentioned, if it's a capital construction, is a new construction, which most people would declare to be capital, then it has to be on currently a PPRTA 2 capital or a ballot approved list. One of Manitou's that might have a chance of succeeding with the current proposal to install some replacement EV chargers at the swimming pool at Rec Center parking lot. Here's the capital project name: Manitou Springs Downtown Sidewalk, Drainage, and Utilities Improvements. So obviously sidewalk and drainage wouldn't apply. So the key word or phrase there is would replacement EV chargers at the Manitou Springs pool and rec center be in the downtown? I think it would be. Would it be a utilities improvements? That's the key question for Manitou Springs, since we're taking a tangent and talking about them specifically.
Go ahead, Jim, if you have more.
No, and we did bring this up. And if I remember during the discussion and the formulation of those lists that we put together, what's on the ballot doesn't get into the details of what is contained in utilities. And if I remember correctly, it was conduit for fiber and communications and not electrical cables and that kind of thing. And so it fell into the utilities category because of the cable and the fiber and that kind of thing. But so we would need to go back to the full description of that project that was presented during the decision-making and the list formulation process versus just taking a name off the thing. And the reason I say that is going back to my question a minute ago, is making sure that we can defend our decision to the public on why we did this. And that's the basis. We owe it to ourselves to go back and make sure that we're within the bounds and the intent of that project. I have nothing against Manitou or this project. I just think that it's going to snowball eventually, and we're going to find ourselves spending a lot of money on EV chargers. And I just don't think that's my personal opinion. I don't think it's the intent of the RTA.
Okay, anyone else? I should say, when it comes to the city of Colorado Springs ones, they probably do make money because people park and go spend, would be my thought, unless they're parking just to go to the parade. But any other thoughts?
Mayor Dixon, in my previous life, when things got complicated, we always went back to what was in writing. What's in writing legally, obviously, is broad enough that it could support. However, my own personal opinion, I would want to see the wording in what the people vote on to be specific and include chargers, EV chargers. Now, what that does is it could open the door in the future for things like hydrogen. We could put in potentially hydrogen stations when we start getting hydrogen engines. But yeah, so my own personal thoughts, the legal wording is broad, but I would want to, again, see it specifically identified.
Go ahead, Miss Ivy.
Just a thought, and this is part of what Rick and I had talked about before this came to the boards, is there's also, in my mind, a distinction that could be made. Right, the law is broad. I mean, it's very broad. But a distinction that could be made is to your point, if it's not something that's enumerated in an actual project, is it incident? Is it clearly incidental to that project? So for example, if it's a park and ride with all related facilities. Okay, to me, a park and ride, sure, a charger there seems to be more incidental to a park and ride facility. Or buses, purchase of buses. Well, those might be hybrid buses. They might be fully EV buses, and gassing them or charging them is clearly incidental to the use of those buses. So just for what it's worth, just food for thought. But I mean, those are some of the, and I know that's sort of contained in some of the questions and materials that have been presented, but I thought it was something worth noting.
I just had one more question. Where does the MMT bus stop when it goes to Manitou?
There are several, well, I mean, there's a number of course bus stops. The transportation hub is the Hiawatha Gardens, which
Okay.
is, if you're familiar with Manitou City Hall and then to the east Memorial Park, and then just beyond that, there's a large parking lot there, an older building, and we have a charging station. But that's where all the all three of the Mountain Metro buses that serve Manitou come there, the 33, the 36, and the 3. So that's really the central transportation hub right
Okay.
there.
Dave.
Thank you for the opportunity. If I could offer maybe a hybrid or a compromise solution to move this forward. You're welcome. One approach could be to approve this one. Again, kudos to Manitou for bringing this forward. It's an excellent example of our commitment to reducing greenhouse gases. But we put a big stop sign out there and say there will be no more until, as Ms. Ivy pointed out, you add this to a future PPRTA voter item. So the voters, I think, should weigh in. And I think to Mayor Dixon's point, this is not just about electric vehicle charging. Hydrogen vehicle charging is on the horizon, and there'll be other alternate fuel vehicle chargers as well. So I think that one approach might be to green light this one, and then to remand it back to the next PPRTA vote and put it on there specifically, but to be broad and inclusive of all alternate vehicle chargers and let the voters decide.
Okay, let's see. Let's go with Commissioner Geithner first and then Mr. Lee second.
Thank you. So and forgive me if I didn't hear this, but obviously we know we have some of the CAC members here, but did the CAC actually take an advisory position on this?
No.
No. Their position was kind of, it may have been, could we say it was no, but maybe on a case-by-case basis, Jim?
Well, I think that I interpreted our guidance the first time was you guys hash this out, discuss it, come back to us with some thoughts. And then based on that discussion and where we were leaning, you would give us more specific direction to either develop something or not develop something. We didn't want to go through the process of trying to develop a specific language for a policy, not knowing how you guys felt.
I had a PAC member reach out to me, as why I'm asking this, and express to me that I'm always aware that there could be a misunderstanding, but I thought this CAC member said to me that they thought it was unanimous that the group did not think that it was wise to move forward on this.
That was the general consensus, yes.
Okay. So thank you for clarifying
there
that,
was-
'cause I was just a little confused.
Commissioner, there was no vote. It was just a look around the room, everybody kind of nodding, nonverbal, general consensus, but there was no vote.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. So, kind of my comments and I wanted that clarification as well. The fact that even if it wasn't a vote per se, but there was kind of a consensus amongst the group that this is a concern, I would not be willing to move forward on an approval with this. I think that one of the most precious things that we have is the trust of the voters. I think that this organization has absolutely done an incredible job, as we can look back and see where the voters have instilled trust and have not, especially when it comes to tax dollars. I think that this is a unique organization, and I very much worry about damaging that relationship, especially at a time when trust is at an all-time low, and we are seeing what's happening in regards to other types of ballot initiatives. So, with all due respect to Manitou, I said this before, I don't think that we should be in the business of personally charging or providing fuel to personal vehicles in the same way that, quite frankly, I would say this is discriminatory towards folks who drive fuel vehicles, to not provide or to provide something for a small segment of the population. And so I just think that this is not a good road that I'm comfortable going down, even for a one-time exception, and then to come back to the voters. I think that's, I just don't think that would be a good idea. And again, hearing from CAC members who, expressed to me that they thought there was a pretty good consensus on that, I think that backs to me up a lot of the idea that the voters may not look favorably upon this. So I don't think that I would be willing to move forward with approving any kind of use of EV chargers at this point.
Okay, and Mr. Oh,
Fidel.
Fidel was actually
We
next.
go online and then I'll.
Yeah, and then we'll let Councilmember Helm speak. Go ahead, Mr. Lee.
Thank you. I was just kind of trying to get a handle on what it is that we are suggesting. So are we, just to get as far as the merits of this conversation, so are we talking about whether we can use PPRTA funds for a project or initiative, whether we should use PPRTA funds for this project or initiative, or are we considering what are funding sources? So I'm just trying to get a handle on what it is, on as far as the clarity of it, because I think we're talking about a couple of different things, and I think I've only heard funding mentioned maybe one time, quasi. So I just wanted to ask for clarification before we're just kind of, I don't know, just kind of talking about stuff back and forth. So,
Well, I think the consensus up here, and Rick can add a comment, is it's both whether we can and should, right?
Yes, Madam Chair, I think the state law is broad enough that it's very broad. Anything from a child's little red wagon to a Boeing 747, anything in between that transports people or goods, hot air balloons, Jim. So anything, it's very broad. And so I think Jennifer Ivey's not going to give her legal opinion, but I think it could qualify because it's equipment pertinent to moving people and goods. Whether we should is the question.
And that's where we get down to the voter intent. So Larry and then Randy.
Larry Tobias. One of the items that hasn't been brought up during this discussion that was brought up during the CAC is that Manitou Springs situation is a little bit different than the complete list that is in your packet of, churches, everything else, is that Manitou Springs already has chargers in place. All they're asking for is they have received a grant from the federal government. I believe that's correct, is a federal government grant. And what Manitou Springs is looking for is some additional funding to close the gap to buy those 3 additional replacements. This is not a new installation. This is a replacement installation. And I think this goes back to what Dave said and Jim has said too, is that what we might need to do is look on it at a case-by-case basis. And in this particular case, we're looking at replacing utility equipment. Because to my mind, as an engineer, mechanical engineer, a charger is the same thing as the transformer that is sitting on the corner of your block at home, is that it's conveying electricity. And in this particular case, Manitou Springs is doing a replacement. It's not a new installation. If it was a new installation, I would definitely be against it. But in this particular case, as our attorney and as indicated, is that it is, available under the Colorado state law. But like I say, the emphasis is that this is a replacement. This is not a new installation. And this goes back to what Jim and Dave said is, looking at it on a case-by-case basis. And we need to look at, this is a replacement, capital replacement, not a new capital installation.
Okay, Councilmember Helms.
Thank you. Yeah, I have several issues with the whole subject. I'll go back to what was mentioned about PPRTA 2. I can't imagine 10 years ago when this was brought up and voted on by constituents that they had any idea that, quote, utilities included EV charging stations. Someone would have to help me understand that if they did. So I don't see how this could be considered a utility under PPRTA 2 and the words that were used for that. So I don't see how we could approve that under PPRTA 2. PPRTA 3 has the wordings that were highlighted in yellow that is, in my opinion, marginal and suspect of being criticized by our citizens if we did this. The third piece, which Larry brought up, you're still replacing an EV charging system, and the citizens probably would not look at that in depth as you or we have to the same extent and be really concerned about us going down that road. And to Dave's point, the next time we're going to vote on this is 9 years from now. So those are all issues that I have that I don't, as much as I may want to support Manitou on this, I can't support even replacing it with EV charging stations that charge or not charge or whatever they may do. I just don't have enough, honestly, from the information we have today and what I've read, I don't have enough information to be able to support this without further study on this in this particular issue, and I'm uncomfortable with that. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Dave.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just to echo Randy's comments about we don't have enough information. I would like to clarify, since I was one of the CAC members that shared some consensus. I think the consensus, and this is maybe Commissioner Geithner's point, the consensus that at least I felt in the room when the CAC reviewed this a week or two ago was exactly what Mr. Helms said, which is we don't have enough information. There's a lot of ins and outs. There's a lot of delicate points here that need to be thought through. And I would also suggest that other agencies have looked at this issue from a different perspective. Again, to Mr. Helms' point about infrastructure, and that's where our CAC members, I think, we're also struggling with it a bit, is that, and I'm not by any means an EV installation expert, but I know EV engineers who I work with have told me the cheapest thing you can do when you put in an EV charging station is buy the EV charging station. It's the infrastructure. It's bringing in the upgrade. I think really true to be fair, Mr. Godfrey's point and what was said here is this is a replacement, yes, but I understand it's an upgrade as much as a replacement. Is that true? Maybe Dole, you can clarify that, because the speed or the throughput, the capacity of the EV charging station will increase over what's out there now. And so I think the consideration you could offer is, again, going back to a design engineer friend of mine who does these for a living in Pueblo, says that the most expensive part is the infrastructure, bringing in the heavier cabling, bringing in ADA ramps, doing concrete work, bringing in the wiring for this stuff. And then the pedestal is oftentimes the cheapest part. So you could say that the PPRTA money would support infrastructure. And maybe Miss Ivy's point is this is incidental because you're positioning for maybe the private sector to come in and easily bolt one in. I'm looking for a compromise here, but I think to Mr. Helm's point, I can't get comfortable either giving a full blank check green light to moving this forward, given PPRTA is a gray area in my mind.
So, okay, go ahead. Hi, Ann Esch. I was one that also was concerned about not having this approved. And I had a couple of points. One was we have free enterprise, which is always a good thing. And that we have limitations in our agreement that the voters approved. And really, they thought they were approving roads. I know drainage affects roads. That made sense to me, but this really doesn't. And then also, I was thinking, we have private money that will match grants if they wanted to look for that with public-private sort of thing too. And I'm just concerned. So thank you.
Yes, Brandy Williams.
I just wanted to piggyback on Councilmember Helms. He has quite the list, and one more thing to add to the list is public versus private. The notion of MMT and then private citizens coming in as well. So I think how we got here is that Manitou brought their proposal up, and the question was, do we need a board policy or do we have a conversation about Manitou? And I think at this point in time, everything is on the table. And to Dave's point, how we get this off dead center is we either up or down Manitou, or we go through the deep dive of gathering all the information we can to create a board policy. And I think that's the conversation we're having right now. And as a group, we're going to figure out which direction we're headed.
Okay, we have a comment from Ms. Sturdivant, and then I think I might be able to sum this up somehow. It'll take all my skill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the PPRTA CAC board. I just wanted to mention several different things related to this topic from the City of Colorado Springs staff perspective to keep in mind, and then provide you with a recommendation that we would like to see you all carry forward with. But part of this discussion really needs to be set aside the infiltration of EV vehicles as they come into the transportation network. We heard last week that right now there 11% of personal vehicles in Colorado are EV. Again, I think we need to set that aside. We do feel very strongly that it should be dealt with in the private entity or private sector, very much like gas stations. And really those are fueling stations, whether they're gas-based or they're EV chargers. We do have a couple pilots in our parking garages, as I mentioned, but the city manages those through a parking enterprise. And those would, as they have been upgraded by the city, that parking enterprise, the revenue that's generated pays for their electricity, operation, and maintenance. So we feel like that needs to be, if you're going to have them as a public entity, that you come up with a way that they're self-sustaining. And that for our case, it is the parking enterprise. I do want to mention specific to transit, PPRTA funds were used, both capital and transit funds, capital transit funds and transit operating funds were used to purchase EV chargers and associated with the 4 battery electric buses. We would propose, and it's consistent with what our intent was with the PPRTA 3 projects, that EV chargers could, or any other kind of charging or fueling system that may be specialized in the future, could be used with transit-related capital funding or operating funding in the future. And as we go through transit fleet diversification and not knowing exactly what that's going to look like, we feel very strongly we should have that as an option for transit. So in conclusion, and in your packet, I really appreciate Rick doing that. He did 3 options with tenants if you were to put a policy in place. The city staff would recommend that we would look at that option 3 summary, that EV charging would only be allowed for transit operating and capital funding in the future. One last thing I'll mention, because I meant to do this when I mentioned the PPRTA 3 items, even though the voters only see the things in the last one, we talk about transit vehicle supplements, things like that. The list with the planned project description was available at every PPRTA meeting, every city council meeting, every PPRTA CAC meeting, and on the city's website on what our intent was for this project and all the other projects that were listed on the PPRTA 3 ballot. So I think our intent was clear, even if it wasn't specifically spelled out letter for letter in the ballot. So that would be our recommendation for the CAC and board.
So if I can summarize what you were saying, the PPRTA transit funding, which is what percentage is that? 10%? Okay, 10%. So if at some point Manitou needed to upgrade its Hiawatha Gardens charging facilities to accommodate the Mountain Metro buses, that's
not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Okay. All right. So, based upon what I'm hearing, it sounds like we need to have further board discussion next month and vote it up or down and move on from there is what it seems like I'm hearing, that it might be a down, but I'm not hearing. I think the board's going to have to, if we want an actual policy, probably give more detailed instruction to the CAC. How does people feel about that?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Mayor.
And first off, I'd like to say that I very much appreciate the comments that have been made here. It's a thorny situation. It's difficult for any of us. Promises made, promises kept. That's the fundamental motto of what we do, what we've done. You know, if we have any credibility or any authority at all, it's because promises made or promises kept. I get that. However this comes down, I'm going to try to figure out how to get those chargers upgraded. You know, whether it's with PPRTA money or if I have to go, you know, try to move money from one account to another. I mean, right now we're giving the electricity away, which I think is a little bit reckless. We're simply putting in, you know, we're going to pull the head off the existing pedestal and we're going to put something in it's an upgrade, it's an improvement, and we're going to basically not take a loss on it as the plan. We don't necessarily need to make money on it, but that's the point. And the reason we're doing that is that we're trying to solve a transportation problem at a high, broad level. You know, what the people are going to ask, what the question the people are going to ask me is the same question they're going to ask you. What are you doing to make traffic move, to make traffic flow? If you want to pull out the long list, I understand that's an important thing, but end of the day, if traffic's moving, they're not going to bother to ask you all the details. They're just going to be happy. Conversely, if traffic is not moving for whatever reason, they're going to be upset. I'm not going to wait 9 years until we get to the next PPRTA. I'm going to go out and rate another account. I mean, you know, we're just going to have to shuffle around. We've all seen that where we have to move money around in response. So I will do that. My staff will do that. I'm confident that we can cross a hurdle. Can we kick this can down the road forever? You know, May 1st, things need to be in place for tourist season for me. Okay. So I'm going to move. I'm going to have to move. We're going to have to, City Manitou will. If the board is more comfortable with taking and continued discussion, then that's fine. I think we move in lockstep together. We support each other. You know, if at some point, you know, Green Mountain Falls or Callahan or something, they need an electric charger, hopefully we'll have a policy that's in place. The small communities are a little bit different situation, I think, than some of the Colorado Springs or El Paso County, where you've got large shopping centers and the private sector not only steps forward, but the private sector benefits, that there's an incentive for them to put those chargers in. They bring customers, they keep customers. Our situation's a little bit different. I think you can all appreciate where we're at. There's never quite enough resources, and we do, you know, end of the day, the most credibility we have is on, you know, promises made, promises kept. Thank you for your attention.
All right. So I think that concludes the meeting.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Well, I would actually maybe disagree on whether we need to go to a second meeting on one aspect here. On the agenda is the charger policy statement. Right? So from what I'm hearing, I would be opposed to going forward with a policy statement. If Manitou Springs wants to put on the next month's agenda a vote of a separate individual for Manitou Springs, that's can go on next month's. But in terms of the policy, I think that's on this agenda item, and we can state whether we want that
Oh,
to move forward or not. I don't think that's appropriate.
oh. Yeah. That point doesn't make me happy, but I think what I hear, okay, so here's what I hear is Manitou is going to try and do it on their own. And then we need to say then at this point in time that we are not accepting any possible, because the agenda item is discussion of possible PERTA funding of EV chargers, and we have to approve or disapprove. So I think it sounds like for right now, we're disapproving having a policy. That would be the motion. Am I correct?
Yes, for or against somebody making that motion, because it's on the agenda. I mean, we can defer, but we don't have to defer. It's on the agenda, not a vote of Manitou itself, but
Yeah,
policy is.
a vote is, what did you say again, Jim? No, for not now.
Well,
Not yet.
We were talking about that versus all the developing a list of attempting to get all the alternatives. I mean, you're going to miss something.
Yes.
And so we didn't, I don't think like I said, we didn't take a vote, yes or no, but we had some serious concerns about, as we've already discussed, our commitment to the public, and the intent of the RTA, and whether or not we have enough information to really make it. I've done some research online trying to find whether there are best practices for municipal funded chargers. I didn't find much. I didn't spend hundreds of hours doing it, but I didn't find a whole lot that stood out in anything. And I just think it's awfully young. We don't know where this is going to go.
I guess my point would be we could, as a board, so this is not the CAC, this is just the board, we could table the discussion of the policy, leaving it open for someone to bring it back on a motion to reconsider if they wanted to. How's that sound?
Madam Chair, that's fine. I have enough information for me to say I would not be supporting a generic policy for the entire PPRTA for this as an option. So that, but if people want to defer, that's fine, or not vote at all, that's fine.
Everybody's looking at me. They want me to make a decision. Okay.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if you could restate that. what
It
you
sounds
said.
like that there might be, there's either a motion to not have an EV charger policy. Is that what you said, Commissioner? Or to not.
I need more I want more study on.
So my thought is that we just table the item. So have a motion to table the item. And when we're ready, we can pull it off the table if that's next year or the next and reconsider it.
I would move the item be tabled then. Seems like we have a lot of details we'd like to pull together, so I move to table.
And I'll second.
Chairwoman, I've had my hand up and we're making a motion and I haven't got to speak. Could I weigh in before the motion, before
Absolutely.
Okay, I appreciate it. Sorry, I know it's hard when you have folks online and I'm sorry I could not be there in person today, but just could not logistically make it work. You know, I appreciate the conversation around this and I think that we can continue to do more research and thought. We don't need a motion or obviously anything to do that. But I think it's been clear. This is the second meeting we've talked about this. I think it's been clear that we have a lot of concerns about this. And I think that it makes the most sense to make a statement about where we are on it today. We can always revisit it. You know, we can make a decision that we decide not to allow this at this point and gather information and at any point change our minds. But I think that we should be decisive. And I think that if we let this linger again, I worry about the potential for even the lingering of this item to be unclear. And so I would prefer, rather than just tabling this, that we actually make the motion to not take up a policy allowing these. And then again, if we decide that there's more information down the road, we can always make a different decision and go back and bring that back. But I think it just leaving it open down the road leaves everyone with uncertainty. And from what I'm hearing, and I'm not in the room, so you guys can certainly correct me. But again, I got a call from a member of the CAC who was under the impression that it was not well received. And, you know, again, all due respect to Manitou, this isn't personal. And you know, John, I hope you do reach out to Tesla and maybe they'll come in and do it for you. But nevertheless, it does not sound like this is something that we think is a good idea. And I would much prefer to be decisive, make a decision, and then again, we can always come back and revisit it.
Okay, so yours would be A. Is it, go ahead, Jennifer, tell me what the right term is.
Well, I think I hear Commissioner Geithner say the same thing that Commissioner Gonzalez was originally saying, which was to make a motion to not adopt a policy at this time.
That's what I heard.
Okay,
And
Commissioner Williams,
yes, now
I
someone
am
else.
talking. I realize I'm not on the board, but I'm looking at your posted agenda. And it's item 4, right? Discussion of possible PPRTA funding of EV chargers. So was this to have a discussion? Was that the purpose of the agenda?
Well, the problem is it says to approve or disapprove.
I know, that's why I'm asking, because
And so I
but I
think,
just don't know what normally the attorney is looking at when it's a discussion, and then how do you approve or disapprove a discussion?
Yeah, typically the agenda lists whether it's an approval or not an approval item, as chair has noted. So, I mean, this is listed as an approval item. I think since this was cross-referenced as both a CAC and PPRTA meeting, the purpose of this was to have discussion, to give the board input. So the board portion of this is, they have the leeway to either approve or disapprove moving
Okay.
forward.
okay.
What was posted? Okay.
And then, so Commissioner Geithner, then it sounds like proposed a substitute motion or a motion that was Commissioner Gonzalez was trying to state.
Don't we have to vote on the original motion first? Because it sounded like we had one motion, another motion, another.
Yes, so the motion to table first, and then the motion, if that fails, then the,
Person could withdraw.
or that we could withdraw the
Or
table.
we can withdraw. I mean, Commissioner Gonzalez's original motion before it was sort of friendly amended was to not move forward with the policy. So I defer to the motion maker and the second at this point.
Who made the motion?
I made the motion to table, and it was seconded by
I
Randy.
second, but I can withdraw my second.
Okay,
So I guess I'm a little unclear here. Then I guess, Linguino's
I had not made an official motion. So yours is the first
okay.
motion.
So, no,
And seconded. If somebody wants to make an amended motion that is perhaps Commissioner Geithner perhaps wants to do that, she needs to specifically state that.
Typically, we have to withdraw. If we're going to make an amendment, we typically withdraw. Yeah.
okay, let's withdraw the table and,
no, excuse me. I don't want to withdraw the table.
Okay.
I make the motion, but if it's not seconded,
all right.
I guess it fails.
Well, I would offer the substitute motion, and I apologize. I'm not trying to talk over anyone here, but I know that it's difficult with not necessarily seeing my hand in this situation, but I would offer that as a substitute motion.
And could you state that one more time?
I have a second. to the
Okay, we
table.
have a second to Commissioner Geithner's motion, or?
No.
Okay, Mayor Grams. Okay, so the
I think
first,
we need to vote on that one first.
so the first motion is on the motion to table. So board members only.
Robert's rule says somebody can make a substitute motion to the original motion. So at this point, I believe you would actually take a second or not to Carrie's substitute
Yeah,
motion.
Jennifer, you're going to have to help me here.
I am not your Robert's Rules expert. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I would have to look it up. So if we can all just agree on a procedure, that sounds fine, to everybody. That's great. If not, we can look it up. But I do not advise my boards to adopt Robert's Rules just because of this.
Okay.
And then, okay, then I'm fine just taking the original motion.
All right, let's vote on the motion to table first. All of those in favor of tabling, raise their hand. And any opposed? Or all of those opposed, I'm sorry. Okay.
Can you clarify how those of us online, you want us
And
to
how
vote?
did you vote, Commissioner Geithner? And we had a mayor on earlier. Mayor Paul. Carrie, did you want to vote for
would
or
vote-
against?
I would vote against the motion to table.
Okay, so, and then Mayor Paul. Or Mayor Pro Tem Paul.
You're on mute.
Do me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Oh, now move your thumb right in front of your nose. Okay, so we have a 3 in favor and the rest against.
2.25 in favor and the rest against. It fails.
Okay, so the substitute motion then, Commissioner Geithner, could you please make a substitute motion?
So at this point, I think it's just a new motion, but I would move that we do not create a policy to allow for PPRTA funds for the use of EV chargers.
Okay, and a second?
I second it.
Okay, we have a second from Mayor Pro Tem Gardine. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. All right, it looks like that one passes 7-2 or 8-2 or 2.5.
1.5.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we've discussed this item of business and we will wish Mayor Graham and any mayor the best of luck finding ways to fund their electric vehicle charging stations. And we'll consider this meeting closed. How's that sound? So we are adjourned.